Oh, 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 oh.
Welcome to Multiple O's, the spin-off podcast for The O Show. The O Show is hosted by Dr. Oriana Fox, the artist with a PhD in self-disclosure. You hopefully know the spiel by now. If you're interested in candid confessions, creativity, nonconformity, and mental health, you've come to the right place. This, my friends, is Season 2 of this podcast, which explores the crossover between working on the self and working to change the world.
Hello there. Thank you for tuning into Multiple O's. I'm your host, Oriana. Before I play this week's interview, I just want to reach out to say if you're enjoying this series, if you love Multiple O's, please do tell your friends about it. Tell your friends who are interested in art and identity politics and how the personal can fuel creative practice. This is the podcast for them, so please do not hesitate to tell them about it. Send them the link. I'd really appreciate that. Okay, the interview this time is with the artist Erica Scourti, who I will introduce in the recording itself that I'm about to play for you. And I really love this interview from the Instagram Live series. And in fact, it is the interview that inspired me to re-release these as podcast episodes because I felt that it really deserved a wider audience. So I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I do. It also continues with the themes that were raised in the previous episode with Dawn Woolley, where we talked about the mediated self and self-presentation in social media and online contexts. So that conversation is very much continued with Erica Scourti, whose work is highly relevant to those topics. So without further ado, here's the recording. Thank you. Welcome back to the O Show at Mimosa House, London. I'm your host, Oriana. Let me introduce my next guest, whose work I've admired for many years. It explores autobiography and collective experience through everyday media, from Twitter to dry cleaning. So let's bring her on. Without further ado, I'm speaking about Erica Scourti. Going to join us now live. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Okay, guess what? It just told me that Erica, you're listening, I think you're listening, and you're waving. It says you need the latest version of Instagram in order to go live. It's funny because for years now I've been thinking of Erica as a post-internet artist, and she informed me today, this just in, she does not identify that way herself. She doesn't see herself aligned with post-internet artists at all. And we were going to talk about that a little bit and other things. But this, I guess, proves the point. The proof is in the pudding. She doesn't have the latest Instagram app, so she can't be a post-internet artist, can she? Ah, you're there. Hi, Erica. Are you listening to all that I'm saying? Let me try to invite you again. Let's give it up for Erica Scourti.
Thanks for inviting me.
I was just telling everyone that I thought of you as a post-internet artist and that you burst that bubble.
Well, the last thing I heard you say was that I work with everyday media from Twitter to dry cleaning. So I thought that's quite a good way of putting it. Yeah. That's one.
Well, I got the first part from someone wrote a bio for you, and they wrote the first part, and then I just added the bits about Twitter and dry cleaning.
Yeah, and the dry cleaning is a very recent addition to like what I'm working with. So that was a good little addition there.
Good. So yeah. So could you speak about why you disidentify with post-internet artists, which I've been lumping you in with wrongly?
Well, I mean, as I was saying a little bit before when we were just kind of chatting earlier on, as I understand, I mean, first of all, like the post-internet moment in some sense is just kind of over. Like it almost post. Yeah, it describes a particular moment when I suppose artists were starting to work with the internet and with various kind of digital media and social media in a much more direct way. And that's still true of my work. But I guess what I've always been interested in, and for, creating social media, I suppose, is the sense of a mass media and kind of at the point where things are just very familiar and a part of everyday life as media, which Twitter is right now, I suppose, and so is Instagram. You don't really need to explain it to anybody, unlike things like blockchain a few years ago. There was quite a lot of interest in that, but it's like nobody still really understands what the hell it is. And I'm more interested in things at the point where they get mass media that everybody uses. But apart from that, I think with post-internet, the way I understand it is that it became or was understood to be very depoliticized and just kind of almost either holding a mirror up to this kind of digital landscape and basically not being very politically critical of what that landscape meant.
I think that's probably, sorry to interrupt you.
I was just going to say there's a lot more kind of background and stuff that I could go into, but I think that's a very kind of simple way of putting it.
Okay. Yeah. I guess maybe that's why you were my favorite post-internet artist, because you were the one with politics or like with a kind of, with maybe more skin in the game or something. So yeah, that might be why I was drawn to your work amongst those. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, how do you see yourself as political? Like what? Yeah, I mean. Political and critical. How do you see yourself having used technology in a political and critical way? Maybe
I mean,
to give an example, maybe from some of your work that employs I
suppose
internet.
With some of my older work, which maybe I was making at the time that the kind of post-internet thing was happening. So like back in 2012, 2013, I did a whole series called Life in AdWords. And with that, I was writing this daily diary, which I'm still doing now, and it's still very much kind of part of my practice and part of the things that I make. But what I did with it was I emailed it to myself, and at the time, Google or Gmail was doing this thing where it would then kind of extrapolate these keywords, these AdWords. And I was then speaking these every day to a webcam. They were kind of edited, but whatever language I was using was the language of the algorithm. So this idea of a kind of autobiography that's read through this other interface. And, the other interfaces that I've kind of outsourced my autobiography to have included friends, software, corporate platforms like Google. And I guess it was about, especially at that time, trying to kind of make visible the way in which profiling works and that our participation within this digital sphere, which, maybe at the time and maybe less so now, but was kind of presented as this leisure thing and a free service. And what I was interested in at the time was this sense in which like the free service is basically, you become the commodity. You affect and your interests and whatever they may be, even if your interests are not being on the internet or not being on Facebook, that itself is a type of kind of demographic category. So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question of how that's working with it politically, but I suppose
I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, because I remember some people saying to me at the time, maybe you could get Google to sponsor it. You should tell them about it. And it was like, no, that's exactly not the point of that. It's to try and make these things visible in order to attempt to be kind of critical of them. And I guess my interest is also in a type of expanded institutional critique, which isn't necessarily about like a museum or a particular gallery, but, these like technological structures or media structures, whatever you want to call them, are part of the institutions that help construct our lives.
Yeah. And I guess I feel like that description you just gave of the person who doesn't want to engage, it resonated with me. I think that might be me. The algorithm might have me pegged as that person. But that's why I particularly wanted to speak to you because I thought, knowing your works like The Outage and the kind of description you give of like thinking of your Twitter feed as like you're talking to a boyfriend or whatever. So like this sense of you're wanting to be or your kind of sense of being free and having this certain affective relationship with the with social media that I don't have. Like I have the opposite. Like I have this intense anxiety and dread, and I don't feel comfortable at all within that context. And this residency has been a kind of trial by fire of like getting to know the Instagram platform and doing these live things and getting sort of a little bit. I'm definitely more comfortable today than I was on whenever it was I started. But yeah, so I kind of like wanted your advice about that. But I know you've been changing and developing, and my knowledge of your work is maybe archaic, especially on internet terms, because like my favorite works by you are like from 2014, and maybe in the internet years that's like ancient history or whatever. But
it's interesting that one of the works that you've mentioned that is like one of your favorites is actually a book. And even what we're doing now, this is a much older format if you think about it in terms of reality TV, but preceding that, the kind of the live interview, the like sitting on the sofa with the guest, like those are long-standing tropes within media culture and TV culture, and which I'm interested in as well in terms of things like the kind of like the daytime format and the way that that's often a kind of feminized sphere as well. In terms of the presumed viewer and often the kind of topics of conversation. And I guess at that time I was interested in Lauren Ballant's writing around the idea of an intimate public, which is where types of consensus are formed through this kind of effective conversation and kind of consensus. Which it's in a sense it's the same thing that we're doing here. It's just on this other platform.
Absolutely, yes.
Which is not to say that
I'm so glad you articulated that. That was amazing.
But also just to say, because I've thought about this a lot. Like on the one hand, these are like a lot of the media that we work with and stuff are, they are preceded by other formats which are familiar and kind of pre-existing and just kind of adapted. But at the same time, I do think there is something specific about let's say social media, because I mean Instagram is owned by Facebook, as is now WhatsApp. And that's,
boo. That's where we'd have the booing and the hissing on the talk show.
Yeah. because that, there's all sorts of different types of archiving going on, and, which maybe wasn't true of previous media eras,
Yeah. So, but your work has moved on and you're not appearing as much in your work. So what has led to that shift?
Well, as I said, like I'm maybe not appearing with my face as much, or like because I mean one of the projects I'm working on at the moment is like and it's taken me forever, partly because of the pandemic and just kind of getting really stuck halfway through editing it because of this kind of change. But it's a series of video diaries, but you don't see me. So you only see my surroundings. There are certain moments where you do see me, either in mirrors or like occasionally you'll see my face in some of the recordings. But I was kind of interested in seeing if you could like still create forms of mediated intimacy which don't rely on the face. So that was one of the things. It's like what happens when you take away the face, which is such a kind of familiar thing, and links it to this character, to you, the artist Erica Scourti. And I guess I'd also past the outage, like when that came out, I had a moment of like severe self-consciousness. There was something about that as a process of kind of handing over.
Maybe you could say a bit more about what that book is.
Yeah, well, maybe how do you understand it? Because I'm always interested to see like how other people have read it, or like.
I understand it as you commissioned a ghostwriter to write your autobiography based on your digital footprint. I think that might be even like the little blurb you write about it on your CV or whatever. Yeah, so I think it's that you got someone to research you and find out everything they could find, like find this digital paper trail, if you will, and write up this thing. And then the other kind of anecdote I've heard about it is that, linked to that quote of you saying that you see Twitter as a boyfriend or something, that the ghostwriter and you fell in love. As a result of the process of writing the book. Yeah. So that's my understanding. And I always, when I teach about that piece, I compare it to Spike Jonze's Her, or like where the character falls in love with the operating system. Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely something in that, except that, of course, we're both real people. And
yes, as opposed to the film, which is the fiction. Yeah,
it's funny we're talking about this as well because me and John aren't together anymore, but he's still one of my best friends. And sometimes I think like it must be annoying for him to hear me kind of just talking about it, or he doesn't like necessarily get to be like, yeah, she was an annoying cow or something, or you don't hear that whatever.
Don't hear his side
of it was, but. Yeah, so he was a complete stranger at the time, and that was kind of important to me because what I was interested in was this sense of while you may have some semblance of control over what you're putting out there's actually a very you have a very limited control in terms of the kind of profiles that are being made of you, whether that is by friends or whoever, colleagues who just kind of get some type of impression of who you are as a person, but at the same time, the kind of web crawling algorithms in the background constantly trying to piece together a sense of like, who is this person? And therefore, how can we sell stuff to them better? And, stuff at the time I was thinking about it in terms of like stuff, whereas now I'm thinking, and in the years after that, it's also.
And how you can manipulate them to vote for.
Yeah, clearly, the whole like Cambridge Analytica thing that happened and, the fact that it's not just stuff that's being sold to you, but political ideologies and so on. But yeah, so that's kind of what I was interested in, this sense of like that while you may feel that you control what you put out there, so much of perception and recognition is out of your control. And so this was almost like an experiment of kind of what happens if you were to just give that over to somebody else and get them to create an image of you. But I was interested also in the sense that anybody could do this. I mean, you could do it. Anybody could do it. And just be like,
if they were a stalker.
Yeah, I mean, but that was.
Or actually, it reminds me of Alain de Botton's first book. I think was called Kiss and Tell, where he's like kind of falling in love with this woman, and he writes a book about her, like in the process of. Yeah, so it is a bit creepy.
Yeah, but I was interested in that as a type of kind of affect of like. That the only people that you stalk are either people you're kind of jealous of, or like somebody you want to hire, or somebody you're kind of potentially interested in. And it's normally at that stage. It's not like when you're already with somebody, you're probably not going to be stalking their Facebook. It's something to do with those kind of beginning moments of like, checking this person out. Do I fancy them? It's not something you would necessarily admit to doing. And I'd also thought about it. And I've written about this actually in a piece called Profiles of You, which is in a book called Fiction as Method, which came out like 3 years ago or so. And I was talking about this weird way in which it almost sets up romance as something that could be potentially reproduced. Like, maybe if he'd written the profile for somebody else, they would have got together. Or like, but what happens if I've got somebody else to write it for me and then we'd got together? So kind of, in a sense, it's like, it was as if I'd like fallen upon some newfangled dating technique of kind of asking somebody to stalk you, and then maybe that will transpire, and then which is all good and well as a kind of theoretical thing, but then what does that mean for like the status of a relationship? Because I remember somebody saying to me at the time, like, you can't fall in love ironically, that's not a performance. Like, having a relationship isn't a performance. Well, maybe for some people, maybe it could be, but
yeah.
Going off topic a bit here.
No, but it's interesting though that I mean, just the behavior of looking into somebody might elicit that kind of amorous response, or that's the guess that you had, the hypothesis or whatever that you had in asking for it to be written. But yeah, it's just strange that the way it unfolds. But I mean, and great. But at the same time, it's like you're asking someone to know you, but in this in this digital realm, which is obviously a very different picture of you than the real picture. But I guess maybe that's where the cracks might start to show, I guess, in the love.
Yeah. Well, but definitely. Because I mean, I think, this is the thing, like inviting somebody to do something like that is kind of offering up intimacy to a complete stranger, in ways that I don't think even I was quite aware of at the time. But then, the intimacy of then actually being with somebody is very different. But at the same time, one of the things I was interested in at the time, and kind of still, is this sense of, well, it's not that there is, that the Twitter self or the Facebook self is some kind of fake, and then sitting behind it somewhere in some realm of kind of that's untouched by, the grubby world of like social relations and market relations and so on, is this kind of pure, essential, untouched self. Like, I don't think I kind of don't buy into that sense that there's like the fake, artificial self that's on social media and then a different one somewhere else. But at the same time, that's what a lot of my work is kind of trying to mine, is like how much of the persona is real in some sense. And I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've been looking at the moment in terms of my PhD has been looking at ideas of deep acting, which is an expression coined by a Marxist feminist scholar, Arlie Hochschild, and she was talking about...
Oh, I love Arlie Hochschild.
Yeah, right. So she's talking about deep acting as being this type of acting where she was talking about service workers, and particularly like airline stewardesses, where they become so, like, the role, and especially the kind of effective responses that are required in order to keep the customers happy, become so ingrained that they can't be switched off. And so I've been thinking about that in terms of like Twitter and online personas. If it becomes so ingrained as a way of kind of being and interacting, what happens when you can't switch it off? Like, you can't come out of role.
Right. And it's interesting. You're like uniquely positioned. How, if you don't mind my asking, how old are you? Like, 45. Trying to place you. Yeah. So you're like similar. I'm 43. So it's like we're a similar kind of generation. We're at this. We kind of grew up without the internet, and then in our kind of, So as opposed to people who are like, grew up never knowing any other reality. Like, it's interesting what you're saying in terms of thinking about generations, and just if the work of going on social media becomes deep. What is it called? Deep
acting. That's her.
Deep acting.
Yeah. And talk about surface acting, and surface acting is a sense in which you still can kind of switch off, or you're aware that it's an act, and kind of deep acting is like when the role has become completely internalized, and that's like the difference. And I mean, I should say also that I often do go off Twitter. I'm off it at the moment, technically, so I'm not always on it. But
what does that mean technically?
Because I did actually tweet something today about having my vaccine. This morning, so that was a bit of I did have a break from it, and also to kind of to reiterate the boycott Zabludovich campaign, which again, that was actually, without going into too many of the details, that was kind of part of what slightly split that post-internet scene, and obviously because of what's happening at the moment.
Yes,
in Palestine. Yeah. So I posted about that as well today, but I haven't been on it, and partly my reason for kind of stepping back from it, and again, this is something I'm interested in, and it's come into some recent work, is the way that it using social media can also become a type of compulsion, and if you become so intimate with your device that you're just kind of chatting into it as if it's your friend on WhatsApp, but the fact is you're not. It's public, and there's something to do with the kind of this kind of weird desire for recognition and to kind of be seen, while at the same time, it's often the things that you post that are too exposing or a bit over the line that get the most responses. And so that's kind of another one of the things I was thinking about, like how do you then become compelled to kind of share too much? And then also what type of like depletion does that potentially leave you with? And again, like how does that affect intimacy? Like I definitely found myself at times kind of, handling personal dilemmas instead of like speaking to the person, writing a tweet and kind of thinking, well, they might see it. And, it's not necessarily that I was consciously thinking that, but that I think was part of the process, because you're in this weird kind of it's like it's the public sphere, but you kind of know who's reading your tweets. There's loads of people who don't read your tweets. They just skip over them, And of course, you don't know who those people are necessarily, unless they like it, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, what you said just now relates back to what you were, or to me, in my mind, connects to that, what you were saying prior to that about chat shows. Like it used to be, chat shows were the arena for that kind of confessional speech. Mm-hmm. But obviously it's all highly staged and planned and stuff in a way. The internet is much more spontaneous. But, and I think that there are positives and negatives of that kind of, that confessional arena. Mm. But yeah, so you've spoken, I guess, about that to some extent, but I'm just wondering, so you said it was after the outage and this feeling of like having maybe revealed too much, that you then started to make this change?
Kind of, yeah. This is the weird thing. It's not that it revealed too much, but it was just more because it was all out there. So a lot of the material,
right? It was already out there. So
yeah, especially because the way that John Harrington wrote the book was he collected bits of what I had put in interviews, but also in projects that I'd been doing. Like I was at the time doing this kind of little project, which I hadn't really kind of advertised very much, but it was called Winning, where I was entering lots of skills-based competitions online, particularly on things like Facebook. And they involved you liking and sharing and commenting in order to win prizes. But a lot of these were, the skill was basically writing. So it would ask you things like, and this was for an insurance company in order to win a holiday or something. And the prompt was write a letter to your younger self. And another one was, write about a Mother's Day, or, so it was all kind of linked to this like consumer calendar, or a sense of how, like what could be sold to you at that moment. Oh, if it's Valentine's Day, it'll be something to do with love. If it's like January, it might be going back to the gym. Anyway, so I was using these as prompts and posting them on Facebook in the form of these really long comments. And that was a lot of the kind of more confessional material that ended up in the outage. So again, it seemed semi-confessional, but it's taking place on this public platform as part of this commercial exercise of kind of, like becoming kind of identified with the brand as well. Because if you like something on Facebook, it becomes part of your profile. And at the time, I was also thinking about this idea of kind of algorithmic performance, that you're kind of performing for an algorithm who will be like, oh, this is a bit odd. You've got a 34-year-old female artist, but she's also interested in life insurance and some other random thing, or like golf clubs or something, which clearly, it doesn't fit my demographic thing. So I was thinking about that whole idea of like blurring a filter and what that would mean, and who would see it. But yeah, it was the fact of kind of not knowing like why certain things had been chosen, and also just something to do with giving your life story for somebody else to write without you having recourse to kind of edit or adapt. I think that was the main thing. And on reading it, it felt a bit like reading an obituary, and that was one of the things that really struck me. And it did really start to make me think about, I guess like the archives you leave after death and how they get interpreted. And that's not just on social media, that's just like all your notebooks, all the stuff. I don't know, all of that stuff. That once you're dead,
so it gave you a kind of glimpse of that.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me. That probably sounds a bit extreme, but that was my feeling.
And how did you feel about that? Like the result of that, or how you might be remembered? Did you feel reassured, or did you feel, I don't know?
Well, I think what I liked about the book was that it wasn't particularly flattering. Like, I don't think, and I think that's kind of what made it interesting, because it's not supposed to be most ghostwritten autobiographies they're written in a way that the protagonist is flattered. They come out looking good, essentially, or at least
right. Yes.
Whereas this kind of
you don't want to get decommissioned.
Yeah. Well, I quite like the idea of that, because it's, I don't know, there was something quite interesting about that. Again, like on a kind of personal level of like that you see, seeing yourself and it not being an entirely kind of positive portrait. That I thought there was something quite funny about that as well. Because again, it kind of goes against the genre. But yeah.
And also a eulogy wouldn't necessarily dwell on your flaws.
No.
So did you learn about yourself from it? Or did you feel like you knew it all that stuff?
I think it's just more that the response the response was something unexpected. And I guess whenever something unexpected happens, you do learn something. And then obviously the fact that me and John got together kind of made, obviously you learn something from all relationships, right? So that was some other kind of thing which was hard to determine if it was work or something else. And I think that's generally something I'm really interested in all of my work, is kind of rather than having like the aura of a finished object or a kind of concrete thing, what happens if you can work in such a way that it becomes unclear like where the object begins and ends, and like where the work, what the kind of parameters of the work are, and therefore does that mean that kind of everything is potentially part of this performance or part of this like bigger work, which is, well, I don't know, the artist's life or just like what they do. And in some of my more recent things, like I was saying, my sheets, these ones, I don't know if you can actually see them, but so these
I see it, but I didn't see the writing on it. I just thought it was like a pattern, a color, like a pattern.
Well, this one's actually blue, so it doesn't look as kind of bright. You can't see it as clearly, but they're all, again, this is kind of using this like diary writing thing. But instead of writing it on the computer and sending it to Google or doing other things with it, like I've done in other projects where I've also done things like using voice memos and transcribed them. But this one is just written directly onto the sheets, because I often write in bed and I like working in bed. But so then it was kind of like taking this like literal thing of like, well, if you're going to write in bed, that if that's the practice, then almost to kind of make that physical. But then what I've been doing with them is taking them to local dry cleaners here in Athens at different places, different neighborhoods where I've stayed since I got here in September, and passing it over to them to wash. So again, it's kind of like, so I don't know, one of the things I'm interested in there is like, where is the work actually happening? Is it in the writing of it? Is it the object itself? Or is it the fact of giving it to somebody else to kind of do something with? Or is it maybe even just the interaction with that other person, which is not necessarily captured, but yeah, I guess my point in saying all of that is like that's one of my long-standing interests, is how you can kind of blur where the ending of what seems like a specific work or a performance it is, to the extent where it kind of becomes unclear what's work and what's a bit of research and just what's like something you're doing anyway. And that includes, let's say, being on Twitter or Instagram.
Yeah, sort of related to that. I was, we were talking earlier in our kind of pre-interview phone call, and I was saying to you that I just want to say how fitting it is that like my first interaction with you in maybe a decade is on Instagram, like during this trial by fire I'm having as a digital residency. It just seems so fitting because, the last time I saw you in person, was kind of before you made all this work to do with technology, digital
the digital age or whatever. And I saw you give a talk at Goldsmiths, but I didn't remember that it was you actually talking. I thought maybe somebody gave a talk about you because I felt like you were on a screen as opposed to really there in the flesh. And again, so my memory has somehow melded you into a screen. And now here you are on my screen.
I mean, I like the idea of that because, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently, and again, this is like a really long-standing thing in my work, is an idea of a kind of alienated or impersonal autobiography, or like outsourced autobiography. Sometimes I've called it, like in the case of The Outage, it's quite clearly outsourced. And there's a sense in which like somebody else is invited in to ventriloquize your own experience. And I guess I'm kind of interested in where ventriloquism sits in terms of like, if you can ventriloquize your own work, do you almost become this kind of image of yourself, like relaying and kind of cannibalizing past versions of you. So to me, the fact that you weren't sure if it was me or an image somehow seems to relate to that, because it's like, is it the person, is it the artist themselves, or is it some kind of mediation of them? And does it really matter? Like, does it matter if it was really me or a me on the screen? Because somehow in your memory, it's kind of, they've become blurred together. So I don't think I'm being very clear there, but.
No, I think it was clear. But yeah, so, and I kind of identify a little bit with what you're saying, because I feel like often I pick guests who will say something that I want to articulate about, like all the things you were saying before about persona. It's like you could be describing my work just as well as yours. So, and also like the Lauren Berlant references, I too have read that book, Female Complaint, and I just referred to it actually on the podcast the other day.
How do you see persona working? Because I mean, like for me, I'm interested in this idea of like, what happens if you get stuck with yourself as material, in the sense of like, if you don't work with alter egos, then everything, whether it's a performance or a reading or something on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, they all refer back to this kind of to this one person, Erica Scourti. This apparently kind of coherent entity, and I've never worked with alter egos, so I've always kind of, I guess, in a sense, like I'm interested in this idea that like the public self maybe is in some way anyway an alter ego. So why assume a separate one?
I agree with that.
Why take on a persona? It already is to a large extent, but somehow at the same time I'm kind of
saying, even the presentation of self in everyday life is performative. So
exactly,
who's to say? But I mean, in terms of, because you asked me, right? So you want to know what I think. Like doing this Instagram live thing, I feel like my persona, my persona and myself are getting closer together. Maybe because I'm in my own home and I'm not like I could reveal to you that I'm wearing like my jeans, it's like I haven't had to get into the full thing. But also, I guess the thing I wanted to say was I aspire to be like, or at least I used to aspire to be like my persona. Although I don't aspire to like wear makeup every day or anything like that, but just like to be the confident, poised, always knowing what to say. But of course, as the talk show host, I don't do that. I'm always messing things up, which apparently some of my audience members really like, that I mess everything up. But I hate it when that happens. So yeah, I want to be this ideal thing that I'm pretending to enact. So I see it as a kind of attempt to, So I want the deep role. Like I want the deep acting. I want the deep acting to happen, but it doesn't, because I'm still just shy, introverted me. But I've through meeting shy pride activists, particularly Hamza Hassan, author of Shy Radicals, I've kind of realized that I've been trying to fit in with the extrovert supremacy, and I should be fight the power, and Shy Radicals. This is our Shy Radical salute. So I should be embracing my shyness and recognizing the that it's not just a defect.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I've got to say like that's. I mean, I enjoy speaking publicly and speaking with people, and it's not I've got like a relative amount of kind of confidence doing that, but I would see that as like falling into this whole idea of kind of self-betterment and this aspiring to some better, more efficient version of yourself, which I'm definitely critical of.
Me too.
And but I feel like this is a bit of a tension in my work, because things like journaling and other things that come into my work have got a kind of semi-therapeutic basis to them, or like they exist within that modality. You're supposed to journal in order to understand your feelings, and like I did this whole project with voice memos where it was almost using the phone as a kind of backup therapist and kind of speaking into the phone and then analyzing the affect within that. And so that so there is some way in which like those types, just as processes or as methods, they touch on some idea that you have to work on the self. The self is something to be improved, and the version that you've got right now isn't is faulty in some way. And if you could just journal enough and meditate enough and do enough yoga and do all of these things, then you'd be happy. And like that, I don't think is true. Certainly, I mean, that's one of the things that I found really funny is like 10 years of doing meditation, 20 years of yoga. I mean,
and you still have insomnia.
Yeah, I still have insomnia. I still smoke. It's like I'm still getting disappointed by people that I think I'm in love with. Like, it's still happening. There isn't some point where you're like, okay, I've solved it, and nor should that there be, because I think a lot of that ties into an ideology of like efficiency, and that we should be good workers and productive at all times. And
yes, yes, I couldn't agree more. But at the same time, what?
That's my rant.
That's a good rant. But the thing is, like, how do you live? How do you go on? Like, what motivates you to do anything if it's not aspirational? Or how do you divorce your aspirations from those normative kind of goals that we're told we should be conforming to?
Yeah.
How do you separate that? So it's like, oh, I want to I can't think of it. Like, I want to be healthy so I can see my grandchildren or whatever it is. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm going to work out. I'm going to eat well. I mean, I've given up on all of that because of COVID.
Well, quite. And I think, this is something that I'm really interested in, even in terms of, let's say, a lot of autobiographies, a lot of the way that those are written, they kind of intersect with self-help, in the sense that it's like the personal memoir is often used as a way to be like, to talk about tales of adversity where the writer has overcome whatever their problem was. Was it addiction? Was it like, terrible experiences in love? Was it certain traumas? And it's like they take you through their personal story and show kind of how they've overcome it. So even just, autobiography kind of can get quite dangerously close to that type of, what's seen as quite a degraded sphere of self-help. But at the same time, like that is also kind of within my work. And just to say, like, there's a quote by, I think, Liz Kinnaman, and she talks about this question of like, is it, I'm going to really badly paraphrase her here, but she's talking about this sense of like, does care of the self, is it always instrumentalized? Like, does it always end up being in the service of capital because it makes you more efficient? Or are there forms of kind of self-attention which can also be productive, both kind of communally and thus, or collectively and thus kind of politically, but also that are just, that can't be captured by capital? I
think that there can and there are, and that's why, and that is the point of Foucault. I know that he's like maybe I'm on dodgy ground, because he's now not necessarily the most admired because of some certain facts of his life that have come to light. But that's his point, that power relations are tenuous. And this kind of came up with Karen earlier. Like, there's always places where one can resist. So, yeah, I think you can harness self-technologies towards non-normative ends. I'm getting very PhD with you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
we're going full on academic here, folks.
But it's always like it's always a kind of it's always a fine line, you know, and like that's the thing, because of course, and the same goes for mental health, and that's another big aspect of my work. I mean, I talk quite openly about having experienced depression a lot, and whatever other things that I've gone through, like that's definitely part of it. And you know, if you're going to do certain things that could be seen as technologies of the self to make you more efficient and blah blah blah, but they make you be able to live another day, then you know, I'm certainly not going to be like, no, you shouldn't do that because it's bad, because it means that you've become like you know, just kind of beholden to capital's imperative that you must always be productive. Like, if it makes you feel better, then that's also important. So, you know, that's what's the tricky thing. Yes. And I wouldn't deprive myself of that, because I know, you know, even though I was saying the whole meditation thing, it's like, I also know that when I'm not doing yoga and meditation and I'm drinking a lot of something, like, it's not great, you know, it's not, it's the road to ruin.
But I think the different, like, there's something you do to like make that is just a self technology that, you know, might be helpful in the moment. Regardless of what kind of goal it's oriented towards. But there's that quote you were bringing up, or that thing you were paraphrasing. I've already forgotten the author's name, but it was about collective things. So maybe it's also about finding a context in which the supposedly negative thing, this negative trait that you're wanting to change, or that you dislike about yourself or whatever, a context in which that trait is appreciated or accepted, or I don't know, valued or something.
Yeah, you know, and so, I mean, you know, that's the point of a lot of kind of movements which are to do with taking pride in these things and sharing them openly, and you know, decreasing stigma around certain issues that may have been stigmatized in the past, and you know, of course, public platforms like Instagram. And
that's what the chat show did in the 90s, you know, in its heyday. It did that certainly for a lot of trans women I've spoken to. It's been like a moment of self-recognition when there was no other way to see that identity in the world. So even though it might have been compromised, it was still like a light, or kind of, anyway. Yeah,
and I think, you know, that's also like a long-standing you know, a kind of long-standing tradition within a certain type of feminist practice. If you think about consciousness raising. And this is another thing that I'm interested in terms of, what I think maybe I mentioned that at the start, of the idea of a kind of impersonal autobiography. You know, one way of looking at that is impersonal because you give it to somebody else, or like an algorithm reads it and creates it. But another way of thinking about the idea of the impersonal could be like, how can it go beyond the self? You know, so that, you know, the experiences that you're talking about, yes, they do relate to a specific individual at a specific time and place, and with a specific race and gender and bodily ability and so on. Like, how can you talk about your own experiences in a way that both appreciate those material specificities, but also could potentially speak to a wider audience, so that it's not just like, you know, sometimes you can feel that if it's just your life and your work, that it's like me and my problems, you know. And so that's something I'm constantly thinking about. It's like, how does it also go beyond the individual and become something which links up to other people's experiences, other people's desires, and also like other forms of kind of collective struggle. So it takes it beyond just beyond your own struggle. And I think that's what, I guess, you know, I see that as a move against the kind of self-responsibility that is often put onto us, particularly with things like mental health. You know, it's like, it's your problem, you know, and a lot of self-help books and that whole genre tends to be part of this idea that it's like, well, if you just did enough affirmations and meditation,
it wouldn't matter that you know, you're unemployed and you know, have no childcare or whatever.
Exactly. And it's like, no, those are structural.
Or no pension plan,
Yeah.
those things don't matter. Like, just
Or
do
not
some more
so much
affirmations.
Or it's not so much those things don't matter. It's like, well, if you don't have them, it's your fault.
Right. Yeah. You didn't do enough affirmations.
Yeah.
You didn't do enough positive thinking.
You weren't positive enough. Yeah. So, kind of your problem. Like, and of course that's not true. That conceals like a structural inequality which can't just be fixed by prostrations to like the god of positivity.
Oh, you just went silent.
I just got a message there that I just got a message saying my battery's running low. Can you hear me?
Okay, well, that's probably a sign that we should draw this to a close, but I feel like I could go on talking to you for longer, and I don't know whether we talked enough about your work, and I am curious. Anyway, I'm curious. But we can leave it there.
Sorry,
maybe it's
I went all a bit... Yeah, it went off on more, but that's part of the work. So, like,
it's my dad always says it's better to leave wanting more than to stay too long.
Yeah, indeed. Leave the party while it's still good. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been really wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah.
And
it's funny that so when we met in person, you gave me a chair. Is that right? Like 10 years ago? Yeah,
a very big red chair.
Okay, so nice to see you again after that long. And in this very different situation. But thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
All right.
Give it up for Erica Scourti.
Is that the canned clapping?
No, that's the genuine love from our live audience. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Bye.
Good luck. Bye.
So that concludes my discussion with Erica Scourti. It was lovely having someone to ventriloquize many of my own thoughts and ideas. So many of the things she said really resonate with me and my work. And again, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Next time on Multiple O's. Next time on
Multiple O's. Continuing on with this theme of self-representation. In digital context, we have the artist Anne Hirsch. That's the real Anne Hirsch, the artist, I should say, and reality TV personality, Anne Hirsch, who is well known for her Scandalicious YouTube web project. So again, continuing on with the themes of this kind of mini series within season 2, focusing on the mediated self in the digital age. So that's something to look forward to next time on Multiple O's. Thanks for listening. Thanks for continuing to listen. Thanks for getting to this point in this episode to hear me say, I hope you will accept yourselves unconditionally, your lives, and other people, because we're all just fallible human beings.